Hi everyone, Alex here. Welcome to the second of our live group coaching sessions. This is the bonus session. So these webinars or these coaching groups will happen once a month or thereabouts. So the first one was last week. This is really a second one as a bonus to try and get you up and running in the coaching program. Okay, so yes, after this, the next one will be in about a month's time. Got some great events coming up. We've got the Byron Bay event. We've got our first live coaching in September for Team Alex for the coaching group, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you all again across the East Coast when we get into some more coaching. Now, what I'd love to know, just by way of making a start, is can you hear me? Can you see me? Is everything going okay? So if you could just write me a quick message to say, g'day, yes, I can hear you, everything's all right. Then I know we're good to go, good to kick off. So yeah, someone write me a message and let me know where we're up to. So if you see me bend down like that, I'm just going to the computer. And of course, this is going to be recorded as well, so you can go back to it later. I'm just trying to see whether anyone can hear me. Somebody write to me a message. Let me know you can hear. So just give me 2 secs. Let me sort that out. Good, excellent. The beauty of technology. I had something turned off. There you go. Welcome everybody. Fantastic. All right, let's make a start. Tonight, I'm going to give you one of the things that I believe to be the most important training that we can do. Certainly at the very beginning, it's going to help to set you up moving forward. And I've done this training a number of times with my own staff over the years to try and get them to understand, I suppose, how this process works. And what I call it the anatomy of a consultation. And why does a consultation need to have anatomy? Well, because in my experience, what I've noticed, both with myself in the past and with other practitioners, is that most of us begin treating and then kind of wander off into the future in a treatment sense, hoping to get somewhere without a really clear plan of attack, a roadmap to get there, and a way of measuring what our results are. So the anatomy of a consultation gives you some very clear steps and guidelines as to how to construct your consultation. So what this isn't about your clinical process. This isn't about your clinical judgment. That's up to you. My presumption is you're very good at what you do. What we want to do is we want to have a very clear way of structuring this process so that people know. When I say people, your patients know exactly what they're committing to, and so that you can get them to commit to something, and preferably that something is the thing that you want them to do, okay, in terms of getting an outcome. So there are 7 steps, okay, so the anatomy of a consultation has 7 very clear steps. I'm hoping that you can see the board. What I will do is take a picture of this and post it in Basecamp in case you can't. And this goes through the 7 steps, and let's just jump straight in. Now, if you've got questions along the way, what I'd really like you to do is to write them down on paper, and then we'll do a Q&A at the end, okay? But what we'll do is jump straight in. So there are really the first 3. So anatomy of a consultation. The first 3 are really a way of setting up for your patient, so your patient knows the framework that you're going to be working within. Okay, so instead of just having a patient sit opposite the room and say, you say, hi, how are you going? How can I help you today? Oh, I've got condition X. Okay, well, let's put you on the bed and stick you full of needles and see you later. That's not a good way of framing the consultation. And the whole point of doing this is creating a framework for you to work within, and a framework that sets up all of the expectations for the patient before the treatment ever actually begins. Okay, and I had a couple of coaching calls this week with Gold and Platinum members, and they were terrific calls, by the way, and thank you to those guys that I've spoken to. And we talked about differentiating the sorts of consultations that we have in our practice. And I've got a few tips up here which I'm going to write along the way, so more so I can remember to come back to them. So 3 types of consultation. But in terms of setting the framework, there are 3 aspects. The first 3, 1, 2, 3, of this anatomy of a consultation are really setting the framework for a patient. And when I have a new patient, the internet's not, just answering your question there, saying the board's not clear there. The internet's not quite as good as it has been the last couple of days. But I'll take a picture of it for you. But I can tell you that the first 3 aspects are about building a framework for your patient. And what I'll say quite openly to a patient is, today, just by way of setting the scene, there are 3 parts to this consultation. Part 1 is, where have you come from? And where have you come from really is about history taking. That's the information you're going to collect in order to make a clinical judgment or decision. Okay, so part 1, where have you come from? Part 2 is, where are you now? And where are you now is really about the diagnosis and explaining that diagnosis in a way that makes sense to that patient. Okay, so where have you been informs our decision making and our judgment based on the information they give us. And for Chinese medicine, that's about asking them questions. It's about palpation. It's about reading the pulse, looking at the tongue. It's about looking at blood tests or pathology, or whatever you have is about creating that backstory, that history for the particular patient. And that informs part 2, which is, where are you now? And it's very important that you explain your diagnosis to the patient. Now, I need to clarify that a little bit. It's important to know that if I have, for example, a diagnosis of spleen Qi deficiency or liver Qi stagnation or kidney yin deficiency with deficient heat, that's not the diagnosis that I'm explaining to my patient, because quite frankly, it's irrelevant to them. What they need to know is, well, why am I not falling pregnant, or why do I have this shoulder pain, or what's causing these migraines? And so your explanation has to talk to them in their terms in a way that is easy for them to understand. And if that's something that would be useful down the track, then we can perhaps we'll do a future group coaching around how you actually explain things. But that explanation is critical in terms of, is that patient on board, in terms of, do they understand what you're trying to tell them, and do they agree with you? Okay, so it's really important actually, it makes sense to them given their particular situation. Okay, and part 3 is probably the most critical part of the 3 aspects, and that is, where are you going? So if you've gathered the information about where they come from, you've determined where they are now. Now you've got to determine where they're headed, and this is the most important part, because it's where you frame the whole treatment and the outcome of the treatment and the time frame, and the patient's ability to stick to this program is determined almost entirely based on this 3rd step. And I'm pretty confident that none of you are doing it, or if you are, you're not doing it very well, or you're not framing it in a way that really creates strong resonance and incredible commitment from that patient to the program that you're going to develop for them. So part 3 is where you're headed. Now, where you're headed is really about developing a treatment plan, a plan of action. So I would say to my patients, you know what, 99% of practitioners begin treatment, wander off into the future, hoping to get somewhere, and really never really get where you need to go. So what I'm going to do for you is something quite different. I'm actually going to create a plan, a roadmap, a way of us moving forward. Okay, so and the patient will go, yeah, that sounds like a really good idea. And it's a way of us knowing what we're doing, why we're doing it, who's doing it, what tools are involved, how long it's going to take, and how on earth we measure it. So this aspect of the process is the most critical component. So let's think about this for a minute. What does a treatment plan have in it? What are the key steps? Okay, and if you don't have every one of these things in your treatment plan, then really it's not really a good plan. Okay, not a plan that someone's going to stick with. Okay, so a treatment plan should have the following. It should have a time frame. Okay, in other words, how long is this going to take? All right, and a lot of people argue about this one. Well, it's acupuncture. We don't really know how long it's going to take. Well, of course you don't know exactly how long it's going to take, but I can be very confident with the gynecological patient it's going to take 3 cycles. Okay, I can be very confident with someone who comes in with acute pain that pain is going to be better in about 4 to 6 sessions. So you can make some judgments around this over, consistency and experience in your treatment. Okay, so having a time frame is important. It doesn't mean that they'll be necessarily completely fixed or cured by that point, but they'll be at a point where they can make a judgment as to what they do next, having had significant change. Okay, so that's really important. So part 1 of your treatment plan is time frame. Okay, the second part is frequency. How often are they going to come? Is it once a week, once a fortnight, once a month? Is it twice this week and once next week? Is it 3 times this week, twice next week? Okay, and again, that's all clinical judgment that you're going to have to come up with on your own as part of developing your own programs, your own signature protocols. But that time frame and that frequency are incredibly important, because most people will say, you know what, why don't you, come back next week if you feel like it, if you feel like it's doing you any good. Well, that's not the way to do it. You want to say, you know what, if you're serious about getting this back pain resolved, I know from experience you need to come Monday of this week, Wednesday of this week, Monday of next week, and then a week after that. And at that point, I can be very confident we've done the best we can to make a start in treating your back pain. Okay, so time and frequency, incredibly important. And by setting that out and then saying, I'm sorry if you can't see the picture, but this says tips A, and part A is about, and this is massive right here. It's about, that says getting micro commitment. Okay, so throughout the whole anatomy of a consultation, you need to get micro commitment. So, for example, if I've said, you know what, this condition is going to take this long and at this frequency, I need to get a commitment right at that point. And it's very simple. I just say to the patient, does that make sense to you? Given what we've talked about so far, does that seem reasonable? Are you okay with that? Okay, get them on, make sure they're on board. And if they say no, then you haven't done a good job of explaining why. And I have to, if I think back about doing this, I can say that with great confidence and accuracy that the number of people who've said no, that doesn't sound reasonable, is exactly 0. Okay, because it's been explained all along, and you've got those micro commitments each step of the way. So it's going to take 12 weeks. I'm going to see you once a week. Is that okay? Yes, absolutely. It makes sense given everything you've done. Terrific. We can move on to the next part of the treatment plan. And the next part of the treatment plan is really what tools are you going to use? What things are you going to pull out of your kit bag that's going to get the sort of response you need? And the obvious ones are acupuncture, herbal medicine, but perhaps you need to ship them off for some massage or some counselling, which we include in our clinic, or some physio. Or maybe you need to go and get some blood tests. Yeah, there's a whole, or maybe they need to join a yoga class, or do some Tai Chi, or learn something else, or experience some other aspect, some other tool that you don't necessarily have, but you can point them in the right direction. So you need to create this toolkit that's going to be most appropriate for them. So, for example, if I had a fertility patient, my toolkit would be, this is what we're going to do. As part of our treatment plan, the best way to do this is to use a combination of acupuncture and herbal medicine. The acupuncture, we do this, once a week. The herbs take a couple of times a day. We're going to do this over this time frame. As part of that toolkit, we also need to consider some LH testing, because we're going to test for ovulation. You're going to do some basal body temperature charting. We're going to check for cervical mucus, a whole range of other things. So anything that you think that you might need to employ as a tool ought to be, or must be talked about in this phase, in terms of creating a treatment plan. Okay, so we've got time frame, frequency, what tools are we going to use? Okay, and probably the other thing that gets neglected but is incredibly important is how are we going to actually measure that? How do we know if what we're doing is working? And how well is it working? So you need to have some measures. Pain's an easy one. If they came in with 8 out of 10 pain and they walked out with 2 out of 10 pain, then you've dropped 6 points on the visual analog scale. That's a good one to measure. If someone has period pain or clotting or some other, or breast discomfort or headaches or migraines, you need to have some measures that you can say to the patient, this is how we're going to objectively observe the sorts of changes that we'd expect in that patient. And I would go as far as actually giving them some expectations. For example, I don't expect your pain to be completely resolved after one treatment, but I do plan for it to be better, and I do plan for it to improve like this over this period of time. So you're giving them some expectations, and you're also setting a way that you're going to actually measure that treatment. Okay, and what it does do, I think, is give them great clarity and great confidence in you. Not only do you have a plan, which pretty much nobody else has ever given them, but you're also going to objectively measure your results, okay? Which means that if it's not working, you'll know. And it means if it is working, you'll know, and you'll be able to reflect on that either way and either adapt, change, modify, or keep the treatment the same. So this treatment plan, as I said, is I believe, the most critical part of this process. So when I talk about the anatomy of a consultation, there are 7 key components, but those first 3 are like the framework that frames everything else, okay? So let's just recap real quick. Number 1, where have you been, which is about collecting relevant history. Part 2, where are you now, which is about your diagnosis and making it clear as to what that is, what it is you're going to be actually treating. And part 3 is explaining or developing a treatment plan that tells you what you're going to do, when you're going to do it, how often it's going to happen, what tools you're going to employ, what sort of changes they can expect, and how you're going to measure those outcomes. Okay? And if you do that, even if you just do that on your own, on its own, and you stop there, your consultation is going to be have a whole lot more impact on that patient. Because when you treating a patient is so much more than just putting in acupuncture needles or giving them herbs or whatever other tool you're going to employ. The most important part, and I believe this throughout my career, the most important part of your treatment is your ability to communicate the thing that you believe is most important to this patient. If you can't communicate that effectively, it makes it much harder for them to understand and therefore to be on board and therefore to come back, as a patient in a way that's meaningful. Okay, so if I need someone to come 12 times and they only come 6 times, you might be thinking, six returns is pretty good. Well, you know what? That's only half of the treatment. Half of the treatment's been left on the table. And I reckon if you've also been prescribing herbs, if they've only done half of the treatments, I bet they've only done a quarter of the herbs. Okay, so how useful is that treatment going to be? How useful is it to send somebody home with a box of herbs, a packet of herbs, to come back the next week to find they've still got herbs left when you only gave them a week's worth? I can tell you from experience that the herbs don't work very well in the plastic bottle. Okay, and I had this conversation with a patient, just before we got on this call. You've got to take the herbs. Why? A, because you paid for them, you invested in them. B, because they just flat out won't work unless they're inside of you. Okay, so setting up these expectations by using this three-step process will go a long way towards improving your return rates, improving your efficacy, and getting your patients' compliance to really improve significantly. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Those three elements are the basics of the anatomy of a consultation. But what I want to do now is I want to take it to another level. Okay, and this is industry transformers level. This is Health Leaders Academy level. This is Team ALS level. All right, and this is going to take a patient who's mildly compliant or reasonably compliant to super committed and super compliant. All right, so this is I'm going to give you the exact sales script, the way that I say things that I say to patients, which means that for the most part, if I say you're going to come for 12 weeks because I genuinely believe that's the best way for you to get a result, then that patient absolutely does that. Okay, which is pretty cool. So let's jump into it. Step 4. Step 4 says, my role is this. Okay, so we've already established their history, you've already got their diagnosis, you've already created a treatment plan. The next part is about garnishing commitment from this particular person. And not just a little bit of commitment, very powerful commitment. Okay. So the next step, part 4, is my role for you as a practitioner is this. And this is really where you frame the whole treatment. Okay, this is framing. Now, there's a book that I'd love you to read. Okay, in fact, there's 2 books, but the first one is a book that I've read about a dozen times. It's a marketing book. The guy's a little bit crazy, but that's all right. The book is amazing. It's called, and I want you to write this down. It's called How to Pitch Anything. Okay, How to Pitch Anything. Let me. I'm just going to disappear onto the computer, and I'll write it in there for you. It's very, very important. Okay, here it comes. Okay, it's called How to Pitch Anything by a guy called Oren Klaff, and in this book he talks about creating a frame that sets up your position or your relationship, which sets up the expectation. It's about creating a context. So this first part does this very powerfully. It's a great book. I really highly recommend you read it or listen to the audio version. So my role for you is to set up, to manage, to oversee, and to coach you through this treatment process. Okay, that's my job. And there's a couple of things you should know about me. One is I'm an optimistic kind of a guy. So I believe fundamentally that this treatment, this program we're putting together for you is going to work. Okay. The second thing you should know is that I'm not the sort of person to leave something on the table. If I think something is important to your treatment, if I think that it's going to increase your chances of success, then I'm going to tell you about it. I'm going to include it in the program. Is that okay? Okay, so I get that micro commitment again. Is that all right? This is my role for you. Now, this next part of the conversation is interesting because in my practice, when we talked a little bit about the senior practitioner model in the original workshop, and my role is to do this first part of the process. It's my staff's role then to actually fulfill the commitment of the program itself. So what I would say to the patient next, this has been my role, yeah, to look, set up, oversee, and coach you through the process. But in terms of the treatment itself, the bulk of the treatment is going to be delivered by my staff. Okay, and my staff are terrific. They're hand-picked, hand-trained by me, and they're going to do. You're going to love them. They're going to do a great job. Okay, so I've introduced my staff. I've given them a bit of a leg up, and I've also said that, you know what, you're not going to see me all the time. All right, this is really important. Now, if you are still in the role where you're doing it all yourself, that's okay. This component may be about building expectation about time frame. So, for example, if you're someone who spends an hour with each and every patient, and it's it's hands on for the whole hour, it's a tiring way to work potentially. Yeah, but if I could show you a way that allowed you to spend the most valuable time at the beginning, spend less time with the patient in the middle, and then spend more time in a review setting, that might be a better way of creating leverage in your time. Yeah? So, for example, I might say, this is my role for you. As we move forward in treatment, we've spent a long time today getting to a point where we've got a great plan to move forward on. In our next 2 or 3 treatments, we're going to spend less time talking and more time just going through the process of doing the treatment. And then what will happen at the end of that treatment cycle, and you've got to determine what that is, but at the end of that treatment cycle, you and I will sit down again and have a review where you're up to. And those reviews are really critical, because that's an opportunity for us to make sure that we're absolutely on the right track, that we're doing all the right things, that we don't need to change anything, and to answer your questions. Is that okay? Okay, so another micro commitment there. So this part of it is all about establishing and re-establishing what your role as the practitioner is. I'm in charge. This is what I'm going to do for you. I'm not always going to spend a lot of time talking with you necessarily. We're going to do the work, but we will have this review process. Okay? I hope that makes sense. If you've got questions, write them down and we'll come back to them. Part 5. This works crazy good. I mean, jaw-droppingly powerful. Part 5. Your role as a patient, your job as a patient, your job is to be a good patient. Okay, and you should see the jaws drop. Really, as a patient, I've got a job to do? Yeah, too right, you do. If this is my role, your job is to be a good patient. Okay, and you should know right up front that I sack bad patients, because, to be honest, I'm not that interested in working with people who aren't at least as committed to me as I am to you. And that's a very powerful statement, and one of the things that Oren Klaff talks about in his book, Pitch Anything, is he talks about this one particular frame, which he calls the push-pull. Okay, which is really interesting, and it's super powerful. And the push is simple. I'm now going to push you away as the patient. In other words, if you're not up to this for any reason, this isn't for you, and that's okay. This isn't for you. And if you don't live up to the expectation, I'm going to ask you not to be a patient anymore, okay? Because you're not doing either of us any good. So this is a classic push frame, okay? Your job is to be a good patient. And if you can't be a good patient, you know what? I sack bad patients, because I'm not prepared to work with anyone who's not as committed, at least as committed as I am, to your health. Okay? And you'll get one of 2 responses: jaw drop and a look of fear, and then clambering to get back into the conversation. Or, as I had today, no, I totally understand. Thank you for being so upfront about this. I couldn't agree more. I wouldn't be here unless I wasn't 100% committed. You'll get those 2 responses. And that's the classic push away. You know what? I'm going to push you away if very, reasonably gently. If you don't want to be part of this, that's okay. If you're not on board, that's okay. But it's going to mean the consequence will be that I won't treat you any longer. Okay. That's the push. Then comes the pull. This is really important, because you can't just push them away and push them out the door, because you want their commitment. You don't want to get rid of them, right? So you've got to pull them in. And the pull goes like this. You know what? That sounds super scary, but actually, being a good patient is super easy. Being a good patient, for the most part, is just turning up to your appointments. It's taking your herbal medicine. You know, and if you and I agree on some course of action together, I expect you to actually do that, you know. And if we work in that way, then you and I will be a great team and we'll get a great result. I don't know exactly what the result will be necessarily, but it'll be a great result. Does that sound okay? How does that fit with you? Okay, so you're getting another micro commitment. And what you've just done is, on the back of developing all that rapport, getting them to understand how and why you're going to treat them, and developing a treatment plan for them, you've now just established your role in the relationship. You've established their role in the relationship, and you've established a really strong team bond between the two of you. I'm going to work for you, and you're going to work for me, and if we work together on this thing, which is really important, yeah, then we're going to get a great result. It's incredible. I can't stress to you how powerful this is. And the first time you say it will be probably scary for you, but you wait. You watch the jaw drop, and then as you reel them back in, you watch the commitment really growing in their eyes. It's quite phenomenal. So part 4, my role is. Part 5, your role is. Okay. Part 6. We're nearly at the end of this anatomy of a consultation. Part 6 is, based on that information, is it okay for me to build a program for you now? Okay, so you know, it's a question. They can say no, right? But you've already got immense commitment because they're kind of with you. They're totally on board at this point, right? So based on everything we've talked about today, is it okay if I build a program for you to address these issues? Yes, let's do it. Fantastic. And at that point, I'm actually going to create a program for them. And this becomes just the formal part of the sales process, because you know what the program is based on? A lot of people are worried about this idea of developing a signature program or a signature protocol. You know what? Your program is the treatment plan that you developed for them back up at step 3, right at the beginning of this process. So the treatment plan really becomes the program itself. And as we go on, I'll show you how I actually do it. But you know, basically what I would do at this point is have a, you know what, let's do it this way. I'm going to jump onto the computer and share my screen, and I'm going to show you exactly how I build a program. I'm hoping this is going to be useful. If that sounds like a bad idea, tell me. But if you want to, what I'm going to do now is show you actually how I create a program. All right, bear with me. I'm going to jump onto the computer and share my screen. All right, here we go. So hopefully what you're seeing right now is, so maybe that won't work. Let me go back a step. Okay, bear with me. It's going to be a bit challenging. Now what I can do is here. All right. So now what I'm hoping you're seeing is my desktop, and I'm just going to zoom out a little bit so it's not quite as big. Here you can see our template program, or our program for our fertility patients. Okay, so a program quite simply could have basically a list of everything you're going to give to a patient. Right? So in this case, our programs, our fertility programs, are broken into 3 months or 3 cycles of approximately 4 weeks each. We've got a range of things we can deliver for them. They can have acupuncture, herbal medicine, counselling, massage, ovulation stuff, blood tests, nutritional things, and vitamins and so on, supplements. Okay. So what I would do is I'd say, right, based on everything we've done, is it okay if I build a program for you? Yes, it is. Great, let's do it. All right. Now, because we get all of our new patients to prepay, I just put paid in there. If it works, paid. Okay. And then I would say, you know what, when you come back to see my colleague, it's 97. And this is follow a bit of a pattern. You and I will have a review at week 4, and this will follow a pattern throughout the first of this program. Okay, so you'll get treatment, 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 followed by a review with me. Okay, your herbal medicine you need is 60 a week, and you'll find that that's there for the duration of the program. It may change from time to time depending on what we're trying to achieve, but you know, the herbs will be there all the time. You're going to need a counselling session. I'm going through this quickly, but you know, you might need a counselling session. You know, you need ovulation kit, you know, once every cycle, and I'm going to give you some, I don't know, some vitamins. Okay, I just made up a number there. Okay, so you can see that in this part of the process, I've got the what I'm going to do, the when I'm going to do it, who's going to do it, how much it costs, and how it all works out. Okay, I hope that's making sense. I might just duck back to the picture of me again and just make sure that that is going to work. So, can someone just tell me that that worked and you could see my Excel spreadsheet? Otherwise, I'll know my tech is not working. Anybody? Can you see could you see my Excel spreadsheet before? I'm not seeing much come up. All right, I'm gonna just presume that you are seeing it anyway. Okay, because the next part of the program, or the next part of the anatomy of the consultation, is about, well, what do I do now? Okay, so I've built the program, and the next part is literally about selling that program. Okay, or actually, you know what? It's not about selling the program. You've done the whole sale already. What you're going to do now, actually, is get their final commitment, which is to put the money in. And what you notice is, as I build this program in front of their eyes, they see the numbers go in exactly as I've done it for you, and they can see exactly what it's going to cost. So the next part of the sales script is really simple. Okay, we say, all right, so here's your program. Your program total is $23.24. You've got a couple of ways of taking care of that. Some of our patients like to pay up front because we give a 10% discount, which will save you a couple of $100, or you can do it as a direct debit over that 12 weeks. Which of those would suit you best today? And that silence is because at that point you must shut up. Okay? You've got to be quiet. And that's the final part of this process. At that point, the patient, in my experience, having been through this now hundreds of times, the patient of the people that I go through this program with, approximately 95% of those will say yes to that program and that price and choose one or other ways of paying. Okay, so what happens is, in fact, we get incredible commitment to the program. Incredible commitment to the program, and incredible commitment to you, and incredible commitment to them as the patient, which is probably the most important thing, because at the end of the day, their commitment to you is not important, right? The biggest commitment they can make is to themselves, right? So there you have it. You may not have been able to see the exact detail in terms of going through building that program, but you would have got a bit of an idea of what it looks like and how it's laid out, and those are the exact words that I use. So when you go back through this recording, and I suggest you do this, and you're taking notes, I want you to actually script out each of these sections, okay? Particularly from part 4 onwards. My role is your role is, based on that, is it okay if I build a program? And now that you've built the program, making the sale by talking about how you can actually take payment. And then it's just a matter of implementing the program, okay? And since doing this over the last year or so, patient compliance is, I can't tell you how powerful this is. And that has an impact on your business, on your income, has an impact on the efficacy of treatment, because patients are actually going to go through the treatment. And everybody's happy. Everybody's happy. And people, in my experience, have been very thankful of having a very clear plan of attack. And that's really what this process does. It's a 7-step process. You cannot afford to miss any of those steps. They are all absolutely critical. And if you're not doing all 7 and you're not doing them all well, then you're not going to get the sort of commitment that you need along the way. So in terms of just finishing that off for you, my number 1 tip for making this work is get micro commitments at every step of the process. Okay. To the point where it could be, is it all right with you if we talk today about your health history and how that's impacting on your lifestyle? Yeah. Is that okay? Great. Let's do it. Okay. Does that make sense? Given what we've talked about, is that okay? Do you understand? Does that sort of resonate with you? Does that make sense given what you feel in your own body? Okay, so make sure that what you're talking about isn't out of step with what's actually happening in them. So getting those micro commitments is really important. So by the time it comes to actually putting the numbers into that program and that framework, they're not deciding about everything. And in essence, because you've already created a treatment plan and explained that to them, every step after that becomes reinforcement, and their commitment becomes much stronger. All right. The anatomy of a consultation. You know what? Adam said to me very early on, because I'm a bit of a perfectionist. I like things to be just so, and I spend a lot of time on creating things, marketing pieces, whatever project it is, and very much guilty of not actually implementing. Okay, and it's the biggest mistake you could possibly make, and I know this purely from experience. And Adam said to me very early on, and you've heard this from me already, and you're going to hear it again: prolific, not perfect. You know what? Get it out there. Start doing it. And I remember when I was preparing to go through this process for the first time, I was quite, I think nervous is an understatement. I was scared. How would this go? And the first time that I did it, remembering that you've got to deliver it from a place of from a genuine place. I genuinely believe, given my skills, experience, and expertise, that this is the best way forward for you. And when I presented it in that way, in this format, that very first time, the patient actually thanked me. Thank you so much for being the first person to actually take the time to listen to the where have I come from bit. Thank you so much for taking the time to explain why that thing affects where I am today. And thank you so much for developing a plan that gives me a clear framework, that tells me how long and how often and what and who and how much. I can work to that, and I know what to measure. Thank you for taking the time to develop that process. And that is a very, very good use of an hour of your time, because I know that if I do this right, that 1 hour is not worth whatever I charge or whatever you charge for your initial consultation. It's worth a lot more than that. And it's the difference if someone comes in at $100 and you think they need 12 weeks of treatment, $1,200, and they only come 6. You've just halved your clinic income, and you've halved their opportunity to get a result. It just doesn't add up. So if you can get them to go the distance, then it's going to be an absolute win-win for both of you, and that's super exciting. So prolific, not perfect. You know what? Next time you have do you have a new patient tomorrow? Yeah, I've got new patients tomorrow. Do you think I'm going to let an opportunity to wow them and to get their commitment? Do you think I'm going to let that pass? No, sorry, because this is going to generate such a strong positive result. And you know, the thing that's really interesting, here's a question for you. When was the last time you went to a healthcare provider, a GP or another Chinese medicine practitioner or anyone, and you walked out going, wow, that was incredible? I can tell you it's happened to me exactly no times, ever, in my whole life. But you know that the people that walk out of my clinic, I see it on their faces. Wow, somebody actually took these steps. So it's not just powerful for you, because we're kind of doing this business health leaders academy, business coaching aspect of it. But you know what? The business is only as good as your ability to service your patients. And the better you can serve your patients and your community, the better your business is going to be. It's not about money, it's not about marketing, it's about how well you can serve the people that you can help, okay? And that's really, really important. All right, the anatomy of a consultation. I think it's time for some questions. So, we've got, how much time we've got? Well, we don't have a lot of time. I've got another thing on shortly, but let's give at least 10 minutes or so to questions. So, fire them up. I'll give you a couple of minutes. Who can give me their question really fast? Okay. Shoot, let's have it. Let me duck down and have a look at the computer. Questions? No one's got any questions. I must have explained it really well. You know what's interesting? While I'm waiting for your questions to come up, I reckon 90% of the time, maybe even more, when I gain those little micro commitments, I know when I've done a really good job, because when I ask for any questions, and I'll do this towards the end, I'll do it a couple of times. Do you, asking your patient, do you have any questions? Do you have any questions at all about any of that? Does any of that not make sense? And when I've done a really good job, there are no questions, because it all is logical, it all makes sense. All right? So it's a good gauge of whether you've what kind of a job you've done. So no questions for me. I'll take that as I've done a really good job of explaining it. While you're thinking, oh, hang on. What about cancellation? Hale, can you give me a little bit more to the question? What do you mean? Give me some context. While I'm waiting for that, I'm just going to take an image of the board, and I'll pop that up on Basecamp for you guys. The 7 steps, really important. I'm not sure exactly where the question is going, but the question is, what about cancellations? Let me talk about cancellations really quickly. This is a little bit off topic, but it's worth mentioning. Do you have a cancellation policy? And 90% of people, or probably more, don't have a cancellation policy at all, or if they do, it's not enforced. Now, the problem is cancellations, particularly on the day or close to it, are a massive waste of time. Okay, waste of your time, resources, money, because you're still paying rent. You might still be paying staff. So you've got to try and eliminate cancellations as much as possible. I think as part of this process, when you send out your WOW pack, and you'll understand more about that as we go along, you need to make sure that they understand the cancellation policy. Now, it's interesting, probably 18 months ago, maybe a little longer, when I went to one of Adam's events, he did a little exercise, and it wasn't something we did at these last events, but the exercise was a cancellation audit. And it was interesting. What we did was we took the average number of people that cancelled in a week or didn't turn up, and we multiplied that by weeks in the year and by the average value of a consultation. And I was absolutely staggered. Do you know how much money that we were losing because of cancellations? Conservatively, $75,000 every year, just in people not turning up. Okay, what a waste of time and a waste of money. So having a cancellation policy means that you, to a degree, will avoid at least some of that. And I think it's something we're probably best talking about in more detail, perhaps at another time, or something we might cover even in one of the live events. But let's suffice to say today, you must have a cancellation policy. You must let your new patients know what it is, and you must enforce it. Okay. Yeah, so in terms of cancelling, our cancellation policy is if you cancel within 48 hours of the appointment, you lose the appointment, you forfeit the money you've paid for that appointment. Maybe it's 24 hours. I'd have to look that up. Actually, I think it's within 24 hours. Okay. If they cancel or reschedule before that time, then that's no problem because it gives us an opportunity to reschedule somebody else into that time slot. Okay. So once they're set up on a program, they need to be very, very clear about what your cancellation policy is. And of course, if there's a really good reason, like they're actually in bed sick and can't physically leave home, I'm not going to charge them for that. Or if someone had died and they had to go to a funeral, I'm not going to charge them for that. Yeah, you've got to use your discretion. But if someone has decided that a hairdressing appointment is more important than their fertility or their treatment with you, then I'm sorry. If you called on the day or you didn't turn up, the policy is very clear. Okay, I hope that makes sense and answers that question. Diane's question is, people who come in for the first consultation expect the treatment, but after all the steps, wouldn't they feel cheated? Why would they feel cheated? I don't understand why they would feel cheated. This process takes me about 40 minutes, 45 minutes. So we always do acupuncture at the end of that treatment. So the way the treatment ends is with, or the way this process ends is with treatment. Okay, so no, they just don't feel treated. They don't feel cheated. How could they feel? Sorry for my confusion. I'm not sure what you mean. Happy to answer more if you want to clarify there. Ginny asks, how do we inform the patient about the cancellation policy? Very simple. We inform them when they make their first appointment. So when someone calls up to make their initial appointment, the receptionist talks them through the cancellation policy. Okay, so they know it up front. So very simple. What we've just made your appointment. That's great. In our case, we take a prepayment for that appointment. We say to them, look, you need to know about our cancellation policy. It's really clear. If you cancel inside 24 hours of your appointment, we're going to be unable to fill that appointment, and that's another patient that's going to miss out on that time. So if you cancel within 24 hours, our policy is that we're going to get you to pay for them. In our case, we make them pay for the entire appointment. Okay, and so they know right up front. We also have it on our desk when they walk in. We also explain it to them when they book their future appointment. So they're being told a number of times, but no, it's not part of my 7 steps in the anatomy of a consultation. Okay, sorry to show the back of my head. So on a scale of 1 to 10, and I want you all to answer this very quickly, on a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you that you could try this tomorrow with a new patient? Okay, put a number in right now. Let me see where you're up to. On a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you that you could follow this 7-step process and not necessarily get it perfect, but make a start tomorrow with your next new patient? Give me a number. Thanks, Di. Excellent. Who's got a number out of 10? I don't mean get it perfect, but actually confident to give it a try tomorrow. Andrew's got a good question. Is this process done for everyone? For example, a patient with a sore elbow might be harder to engage. Yeah, absolutely. This process will work for every patient to a degree. But look, if you think your treatment process is only going to be relatively short, say 3 or 4 or 5 sessions, you probably don't need to kind of be quite as forceful in getting them to come back. But certainly the first 3 parts, where have you been, where are you, and where are you going? Yeah, absolutely is important. In fact, I had a patient today who came in with what did he have? Lower back pain. Okay, now just was a quirk of how things turned out that I saw this patient today. But the same thing was true. Where did you come from? How did you get to this point? Okay, here's the point you're at and why. Here's what we're going to do about it. And my treatment plan was time frame, frequency, tools, how we're going to measure it, micro commitment. Is that okay? Does that make sense? Terrific. All right. My role for you is to do this. Okay. Your role is to make sure that you're a good patient. If I say to you, and we agree that you're not going to, with your sore elbow, you're not going to play tennis or golf this week because that's going to aggravate it, then I expect you to actually do that. So that main part of the anatomy of the consultation is going to be identical, regardless of what kind of condition comes in. It might be condensed. It might be a shorter explanation because it might be a simpler treatment. But each step is equally as valid and as important. Okay, I hope that answers the question, Andrew. Turing asks, so I've added it to my new patient form, which they have to fill out and sign the cancellation policy. That's a great idea. I love that. I think I might steal that, Turing, and do that for myself. Put your cancellation policy on the bottom of the intake form. Brilliant. Just out of interest, Siri, how is that working well? Has that been a good option for you? All right. Brilliant thinking. I reckon everybody should do that one. Anita's feeling very confident. Hayuk's feeling very confident. Kelly's confident. Tering's very confident. Jonathan's very confident. Francis is very confident. Di's very confident. Hey, you guys are fantastic. I love confidence. It's not about perfection. Prolific, not perfect, right? So give it a crack. What I'd love you to do, and hopefully you've gone and joined the Health Leaders Academy Facebook group. If you haven't, go and do it. And what I'd love you to do, because there are different groups in Health Leaders Academy. There's naturopaths, there's the chiropractors, and there's the best group, which is the Chinese medicine group, or my group. And what I'd love you to do is jump on there and tell me how that first, tell me how it goes. Put it on the Facebook group. I want you to say something like, "Hi, I'm on Team Alex. I'm a Chinese medicine practitioner," or whatever you are, however you consider yourself. I've just implemented this for the first time, and this is how it went, and this is how I feel. I'd love you to do that. That'd be great. Not that there's any competition between the groups, but we still want to be the best, right? All right. Fantastic. And Sharon comes back in terms of adding cancellation policy to the bottom of the intake form. Works very well. Fantastic. Great idea, Sharon. That's brilliant. Thank you for sharing. All right. So thank you so much for being on tonight, this bonus session. This has been really important because the thing that's made perhaps the greatest impact in terms of creating change in my business has been the way that I've developed this process. Okay, so what I want you to do, it's a plug and play process. It's a matter of working out, writing down, going back through the video, writing down the script, using your own language where you want to, modify. You don't have to do it exactly word for word, although word for word actually works pretty well. And then implement it, plug and play it into your practice, and see what happens. See, just notice what kind of responses you get each step of the way. And if you're not sure, post it in the group, and perhaps we can talk about it as we go. All right. Thank you so much for coming along. Great questions. Thanks for being involved. Look forward to seeing you in September, and our next live group coaching event will be in about a month's time. And I'll give you those dates very shortly. Great to have you on board, and the replay will be available shortly as well. So if you haven't had a chance to be here all the time, or you've missed some bits, then please go back and watch the replay, which you'll all have access to anyway. But until next time, this is Alex signing off, and all the best with your business, and I'll speak to you soon. See you guys. Bye.